You're listening to the Fit Bottom Girls podcast, the only podcast for active, athletic, and adventurous women and those who aspire to be. We've got your back as you navigate the ups and the downs of motherhood, midlife, and menopause. I'm your host, Alison, here to remind you that female isn't fragile. I'm a strength, conditioning, and nutrition coach who's trained hundreds of women to achieve their goals to get fit, lift heavy, go the distance, and feel like a badass in every area of their lives. Each week, you'll hear from me and some of our awesome guests as we educate and empower you during each stage of your fitness journey, whether you're already crushing it, fighting to get back out there, or starting from day one. So friends, let's get into it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back for a very special episode of the Fit Bottomed Girls podcast. I am Alison, and with me in the virtual room today are two women who need no introduction to the fit bottomed world. I'm talking about Jen Walters and Kristen Seymour. And today we're coming together for a two-part conversation to share a bit about what's been going on with FBG past, present, and future. In this first episode of our conversation, we talk about the origins of FBG in 2007 and 2008, some of the amazing accomplishments and highlights along the way, and what led them to hang it up in 2020. This conversation has been in the works for over a year now, and I cannot wait to dig in and share this story that forever connects us all. So let's go. Jen and Kristen, welcome back. It's so nice to see you.
Awesome to see you too.
Same.
It's so good to finally be in the same room to talk about Fit Bottom Girls past, present, and future. There's been a lot of stuff happening, but I thought we would just start by digging into, because we're transitioning and we're relaunching and rebooting. There's going to be new people coming in that are going to be familiar with the brand that may not have been familiar with the brand before. I really want to talk a little bit about the start of Fit Bottom Girls. And for those who maybe don't remember 2008 as well as the rest of us, what was the landscape like back then? And what made you start the blog? What was the mission behind the blog? What were you seeing in the world that you were creating in response to?
A lot of the iteration of Fit Bottom Girls started closer to 2007, where I was going through my own personal struggles with body image and self-confidence. And at that point, I was preparing for my wedding. And I'd been in the industry, I taught group exercise, I'd been a personal trainer, and I thought I was fairly empowered. But as I got closer to the wedding date and putting on a dress and knowing I was going to walk down an aisle, I began to become like hyper aware that the only thing that I was really, really worried about that day was, what was I going to look like in my dress? Was I going to fit into my dress? And then I began to have this moment around that said, oh God, is that the only thing I'm going to be thinking about on that day? And once I had that realization, I was like, oh goodness, I'm obsessive about this. I am actually not living that healthy of a lifestyle. My headspace is not that healthy and I need help. Because I don't want to do that on my wedding day. I want to be present, and I wasn't going to be present. So I met with a registered dietitian who happened to specialize in intuitive eating, which is a concept I did not know at the time. Now I feel like it's much more widespread, but I'd never even heard of it. So I somehow, by luck, stumbled into this woman's office, or not luck. And she goes to me, can you imagine what the women of this world could do if they weren't focused on the number on the scale? And that was my big like, oh God, I'm an asshole. I have all this power. I have all this time. I have all of these resources. And what am I doing? I'm just constantly fixated on what I look like and am I enough? So I was like, all right, I got to do better. So then I got into intuitive eating. Once I started to realize had this realization myself, then I began looking at the industry of which, I'm trained as a journalist and a health journalist. So then I began to look at all of the magazines and the messaging around that and just started to be like, no, not all of this. Like, no, no wonder this.
Yeah, this is where it comes from.
Right. So this point, I just met Erin. I just started a job where I met her, Erin Whitehead, and I was like, I think I want to start this thing that does this whole women's journalism and health and fitness better. I feel like we can do it better. Let's do it better. And so somehow she was like, okay. And then it was like, okay. And then we each put in $100 and started a blog spot. And from there, it just, I think the timing was right. The messaging was right and was just empowering and tongue in cheek enough. And I mean, it truly felt like a call, like an inner call that I had to get out in the world that was both healing for me because it felt like it kind of like righted some of my own personal wrongs of time that I had wasted in my life. Yeah, deeply healing to me and then also made a difference in the world, which was really important.
Yeah. And for my part, it's not as dramatic a story as Jen's, but important, I think. I was writing in the health and wellness space for AOL, and Jen and I met on a media trip. And I had been a fan of FBG because I mean it was the only voice out there doing this. So and that was probably, I don't know, a couple of years after Origin, not very long. And got to chatting, and she agreed to let me write for them a little bit, and I did, and it was a great fit, and I was so proud to be able to, to add to that mission. And a few years in, I wanted to be a bigger part of it, so I bought in as a partner, and here we are today.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the things that, I remember as a fan of Fit Bottom Girls is uh there was so much information out there and noise out there that was what we know now as diet culture, what we call diet culture now. Then it didn't have a name then. It was just women's health and fitness. And it was one note, right? There was a lot of just like Jen, to your point, when you find yourself in these moments of thinking about body image and how much time you're wasting, how much energy you're wasting, not liking your body, not happy with your body. And then you look around you and you're like, it would be almost impossible at that time to not be overly critical of your body because every single message coming at you, lose 5 pounds in 2 weeks and get your bikini body, and the imagery of women in the health and fitness space was very homogenous. And that was one thing that whenever I first started reading Fit Bottom Girls was really what set it apart, was that the way that you spoke to your audience was very different. There wasn't this assumption of the only reason you're doing this is to lose weight, or this is the only valid reason why you should be doing this, right? I found that so refreshing at the time. I'm glad you had this epiphany, and I'm glad that you didn't just keep it to yourself. I'm glad that you shared this with the world and that you brought Kristen on. But here we are. The challenge with it is when you're doing something that no one else in the industry is doing, there's no roadmap. You're going into no man's land. There's no protocol for this. So tell me some of the challenges that you all have faced in the growth and evolution of Fit Bottom Girls.
Yeah, I also think in a lot of ways that we were, myself, like especially like, we were all young and we're all just figuring out as it goes and not even really fully like knowing we were doing something different but not knowing the scale or like you were saying like the language of what we were doing, like the terms now I talk about like diet culture and like women's social currency, but those were not things we were saying. We were like, hey, do this because it's fun, or hey, don't take that because that's bullshit, that sort of thing. I think there was so much, I mean, this continues to be true of internet publishing, but things just would change so quickly in terms of guidelines and regulations and like monetization. And then we were at the beginning of so many different influencer campaigns. And so you're just thrown into new experiences where you're like, what are the ethics of this? If Nike sends me to San Francisco and lets me do this race and I meet famous athletes and they give me all of this like swag, like what do we do? We disclose everything, but it was like all of that was changing. The FTC then started coming out with regulations for all of that. So there's like that side of the business side. And then we were also, went from we have this blog spot to now we have this website to now we're somehow making money to now things are scaling and literally our site cannot keep up with traffic. Or now we're getting, comments that are anti what we are. How do we deal with that? And then there are just larger challenges of staying on message and the monetization of staying on message. And then as anti-diet and positive body image and neutral body image became more popular and we weren't the only ones saying it, it's like it's almost like we were part of people that made the market, like change the market to what it is, to be more body positive. But as that happened, then people were like, oh, maybe there's money to be made here. And then, but then what do you sell? Because at the end of the day, there's no product to sell there.
Yeah.
So then marketers just became sneaky, and you see it today. You see tons of companies now that kind of act like they're one thing, act like they're about empowering the woman, but at the end of the day, it's still about weight loss. It's still about selling you the detox tea or whatever, BS product it is. And so for us, it was like, okay, well, we need money to support ourselves to do this, to literally run the site. But how do we get those funds? And how do we get those funds in a way that still supports our message? And I will say towards the end of my time being like really engaged with Fit Bottom Girls, I became very jaded with the industry at large and almost angry. I was like mad that so many people have taken the message and just turned it. So it was still freaking diet culture. It was just done in a more body positive light. And we certainly made our share of mistakes along the way in terms of what we wrote about and what we covered and the whole evolution of what we did. But yeah, plenty of growing moments.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's been interesting to look back at what we've done and who we've been, because like we are human people who were on our own personal journeys all the way through this. So, no matter how strong your North Star is, it can be a little bit of a challenge at times to just stay fully focused on that when you've got 95 other things flashing at you. And there's the trends that if you're going to grow on Instagram at this time, you need to be at least engaging in this. And that makes it confusing for people who are still trying to make sure that we're, this comes about because we're trying to do the thing that's right for us, because we know that what's right for us is going to be right for a lot of other people out there. So that's certainly a challenge. And just to really be very strongly behind what Jen was saying with trying to make it a business, you all, the number of pitches that we got for, like, if we had taken up all of the, diet supplements and all the shady crap that came our way, I would be living in a really nice house. Like, if we were willing to go that route, it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I understand why people are tempted by it, because wow, that's what a business model to just go along with what comes, but wouldn't be able to sleep at night, wouldn't be able to look anybody in the eye.
Yeah.
So for all of what could have been, I'm really happy that we kept it where it was and that we are where we are now.
Yeah. We could have sold the site a number of times. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we're like, no, we're dying on this hill, guys. We're dying on it.
Yeah.
I mean, turns out we didn't have to. Thank God.
What also needs to be said here is that 2008, 2009, even internet was different, right? Like social media was
Hugely.
not, I mean, like there was Facebook, but we didn't have 15 platforms that each have their own things going on. And just the volume of availability we have to the world and how much people expect us to put out into the world and how much of us they feel entitled to. I know that one of the things I really loved about Fit Bottom Girls, because I started to read Fit Bottom Girls because of what you guys really started as, was really the reviews of workout videos, right? So there were a lot of those and you guys were always unbiased. And that seemed to be, I mean, from somebody on the outside, was one of the reasons why so many people loved you, was like, you would tell us if something was crap. Like there was no sugarcoating it. I appreciated
And these were DVDs,
that.
let me say.
Yeah.
These were DVDs.
Yes, DVDs.
The stacks of them that we
order
went
them
through.
from Netflix. I would order them from Netflix and they would come in the mail, guys.
When I set it up down here years ago, when I quit my job to run my business. And I had so this was the workout room. And I had a dresser down here, and in that dresser were DVDs. And I'm like, I don't even know what to do with these anymore. I don't think I have a machine I can even insert them in. But yeah, I can imagine navigating then, because it's a blog right now. You're trying to make a creative business. And businesses need money to pay the creators. They need money to pay for all of the expenses of just maintaining a website. So there has to be money coming in. You're getting an enormous number of offers. And the world of internet marketing is really becoming about sponsorships and influencers during that time. And people are willing to throw a lot of money at creators to be the voice of their company and to be a group of women who really, like you said, you're willing to die on the hill of unbiased, we're sticking to the mission, right? And then have all this money being flashed in front of your faces must have been really challenging and difficult, because you have this desire to spread the word and the mission farther. That happens when you have more money coming in. But that method, that path that you're being enticed down is so against your mission that it's just, I'm sure there were a lot of moments where you were like, especially because that's what people are doing now. That is what the world of internet marketing is. There are a lot of people that are doing sponsored ads, and they're supporting their business that way. And they're doing it on YouTube and on all platforms now. This is how marketing is done, through creators. And some people are really successful with that model. So we talked a little bit about the challenges. Okay. So let's talk about the highlights, because I think there were so many of those. And I want to see what happened in this time period that you guys are most proud of and they're really excited about remembering and talking about.
So I think for me, some of the biggest, oh my God, that actually happened. I can't believe that actually happened. When Jenna Bush Hager for the Today Show, went to Erin's house. She went to Erin's house and hung out for the day with her family while Erin was showing her how to lunge and pick up toys, because Fit Bottom Mamas wasn't that old at that point. I remember watching that on TV and seeing pictures from Erin and be like, oh my God, because she lives on the East Coast, I'm in the Midwest. All of us were, holy cow, that's insane. And then obviously, Erin and I got to write a book. That's amazing.
Wait.
Two books. We did write 2 books. See, sometimes I even forget. I wrote 2 books. Who knows? There was a whole set of challenges with that too, and a little bit of mixed messaging through the process of the anti-diet. That one, I'm always like, oh my gosh, I wrote that book, but that book still got placed on the shelf next to all the diet books. And that still is something that that for whatever reason, that timing for me feels a little bit off. So half of that feels like my life manifesto and half of it doesn't. But my absolute favorite thing that happened, and there's so many different things that happened, because I got to hang out with Bob Harper, and he ran me through a workout, and I did pull-ups in front of him, and then we made tacos together. We did a cooking segment, and he was my first time that I saw someone who was really talented and in their zone be really authentic on camera, but then also be really authentic off camera. But I would see him turn it up for the camera. I remember watching that and just being like, well, that's fascinating. He was great. But my biggest thing that happened was I was writing because a lot of us during this time still would write for other outlets. That was one of the ways that we did make money, was that we didn't just do FBG. So I wrote a ridiculous amount of content for Shape Magazine for their website. And through that process, that kind of introduced us to even a bigger, sometimes reach of celebrities and things. And so oh, Jen, do you want to interview Maya Angelou? And I was like, excuse me, what? Yes, I would. Yes, I would. Because she was launching this heart health, women's heart foundation, something. And I was like, do you have a problem if whatever I use, I'll write something for Shape, but I'll also use for Fit Bottom Girls? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, great. Let's do it. So I hop on the phone and have a 20-minute conversation one-on-one with Maya Angelou. And so I get on with my questions to ask about the Heart Health Center and everything that I'm going to cover, XYZ. That woman barely gave me any information about that center. I asked one question and she would answer with something else about women's friendship, women's connection, showing up in your power, all of this different stuff. I remember sitting in my office at the time. I mean, I'm not crying, but just like tears, just like streaming down my face because it was the messaging I needed to hear at the time. I'm like, oh my God, like, oh my God. So I get off the phone. I, write enough to get my shape thing together. I write my very personal thing for Fit Bottom Girls that's about that. And I called my best friend at the time, it was FBG Tish, called her. And I was like, I don't even know how to explain what just happened to me. It was like a spiritual experience. And she goes, like standing in front of the ocean. And I was like, it was just like standing in front of the ocean. That entire experience was just like standing in front of the ocean. So, and I still think about that a lot. I mean, I got a kid named Maya. So it was a big formative thing for me. And as we got later into the evolution of Fit Bottom Girls, it played a big part in it not just being fitness, because we started out as fitness, but then we added the motherhood component and then the food component and then the Zen component. But some of that conversation helped me not only go deeper in my female friendships, but realize that true health and wellness isn't just about workouts, isn't just about eating. It's about everything in life. So many good moments though.
Yeah, and I think that inspiration for connection is a really big part of all of this because for me, some of my top memories have to do with, we were talking about like the influencer brand stuff, but we were Brooks brand ambassadors for many years. Like we were there at the start of their program and stayed with them for quite a long time. And that gave me the opportunity not just to go to some really cool events and meet their professional athletes, but I got to meet all of these other bloggers and runners and people at really varied stages of their athletic journey. And any longtime readers will remember I am not what one would consider particularly speedy, but I'm very enthusiastic and I love it. And just some of those things like going to Albuquerque to altitude training camp and getting to do the same workout differently, admittedly, but the same workout as the Brooks Beasts, or going to Seattle and having the chance to run the rock and roll half marathon there. And I got a PR surrounded by like some of my best running friends there. It was just very special. I'm still friends with those women. I'm still in contact with them. We send cards, we send notes. It's wonderful. And it's really cool to watch their journeys as well, because we've all grown, we've all changed, people are embarking on different careers, kids, no kids, whatever. And then the one other thing that I will mention is FBG did a great job of pushing me outside of my comfort zone. I am not as comfortable with the visibility aspect of being a part of a business like this. I'm a writer. I'm pretty damn good at it. And I'm great at being behind a keyboard and not on camera and not in front of people. But I had a chance to go and present to the Institute for Integrative Nutrition at the Jazz at Lincoln Center. So I was on stage leading a workout for like 1,000 people. Not my everyday life. And I got a lot of dry mouth after that. I got real nervous. But what a cool experience. And it wasn't a hard workout. It was really about teaching people how to incorporate movement into their day, into like the things that you're doing anyway, and just to get yourself feeling a little more mobile, maybe a little stronger, maybe a little looser. But it was great to look out there and see all of these people who had been sitting in sessions and just being engaged with this dirtbag up on stage doing some squats. So anyway, it was...
Hell yeah, you did. I used to make you get on camera way more than you wanted to.
Yeah.
I mean, like, record it.
Not my place of comfort.
So there were more highlights. And what's interesting in all of that is that the highlights really came from points of community and connection. That's the undercurrent there. You did some really cool things and they were all fitness related or fitness adjacent. But what really made them stand out for you was that community and that connection piece.
Hey, you. I wanted to press pause on this episode for a second to talk about your fitness goals. You know, those sweet dreams of being more active and feeling athletic and confident and doing epic, adventurous shit. Or maybe you just feel like you're getting older, because we're all getting older. And you, like me, never want to give up on carrying all the groceries into the house in one shot or picking up that heavy Amazon box without worrying that you're going to throw your back out. I know you're busy. You're probably listening to this episode while multitasking. Oh yeah, I'm on to you. And the biggest thing that's stopping you from getting strong and fit is knowing how to use your workout time most effectively. like exactly which exercises are worth your time, when to do them, and the number of sets and reps to get to your goals. You probably also tried other fitness apps and programs out there, only to feel like they weren't right for your needs. You want a program that has it all: strength, power, cardio, mobility, and recovery, all built right in without spending your whole life in the gym. And you want experienced coaches around to answer your questions, and a community at your back to help you stay motivated and inspired. Look, I've been coaching women for a long time now, and the truth is that you don't need another fad diet or complicated, time-consuming workout routine to support you as you age. You just need to train smarter with simple, progressive workouts and a plan that's designed for your body and your life, whether you're navigating motherhood, midlife, or menopause. And if this sounds like exactly what you've been missing, I invite you to join Stronger 365, a progressive strength, power, and conditioning training membership for women like you who are ready to stop winging it and take their training to the next level with more structure and support. And the best part, this program has 3 different options, so you can choose your own fitness adventure based on your goals, how much time you have to train, and what equipment you have, whether you've got access to a full gym or, like me, work out at home. And it's run by me, Alison, and my awesome team at Miles to Go Athletics. Head over to the show notes for all the details and to join our membership community. And as an FBG, your first 2 weeks are on me. And now, let's get back to the episode.
So now we are in 2024, 16 years later. But in terms of the health and fitness space itself, is there anything that's changed over the last 16 years? For good or for worse, right? That you're really noticing because you had this front row seat to all of it for that 16-year period, being right at the front of all of it. What stands out for you now? What's different?
I know that my perspective is going to be different because I've been so immersed in it for so long. But honestly, I mean, probably once a week, something will happen, or I'll hear something on like mainstream media, or my daughter will say something, and it's so much better than would be done before that I almost have to pinch myself to be like, oh gosh, this is like mainstream. You know, if you look at the magazine covers now, it's different. Those are different headlines than then, for sure. And I even think about like good foods, bad foods, intuitive eating, all the creators that are now doing really, really good job of continuing to push the boundaries of what we were doing. What's that account? My Latina nutritionist, who she's constantly just like, no, like rice and beans are fine. Why is it healthy over here and not healthy over here? And I'm watching all that just like, let's go, take that baton. Towards the end, we started to have conversations about how do we continue to make change in the industry? How do we continue to push the bounds? And if the messaging is out, the media has changed, and other people are on Instagram and all the social media platforms doing the thing better at the time than we were doing it, then what can we do? And we got to this idea, this kind of ties into Kristen being on the stage too, was like, okay, well, what if we start targeting the people that are leading group workouts? And how do we target the personal trainers and the group exercise people? Or those are the leaders within those communities. So how can we better educate them on what's a more empowering way to talk about exercise than, well, it's Taco Tuesday and you better earn those tacos. Like, how can we give them something, quite frankly, that is boring? Not only is that diet culture-y, but it's overused and it's boring. We can do better. How could we train those people to empower their groups from the better mindset? So we had all those conversations, kind of had some ideas, never really went anywhere, XYZ. So this was probably, Kristen, like a year ago, maybe, where American Council on Exercise, ACE, I got this email from them, and it basically said that they were doing that. They had programs, and that was now part of their education, was this empowerment, like fitness at any size, health at any size, every size. And I had been waiting for like the sense of completion, I thought, with Fit Bottom Girls, or that I didn't realize I was. But I opened up this email, I saw it. Theme for me, crying. So I open it, just start crying. And I'm like, oh my God, this is apparently the moment. This is the moment. So back to the highlights, not the book, not the this, not the that. There was never as much emotional fulfillment as I expected for reaching those milestones. But I saw that and was like, oh my motherfucking God, that makes a difference. That makes a huge difference in a ripple effect in ways I can't explain. And we were a part of that. We were 100% a part of that. We didn't pull off that idea, but somebody did. And God bless, I'm glad that they did. So yeah, I remember being like, okay, all right, my work here's done. Like, my work here is done.
I want to pull a thread there real quick before I let Kristen go. You mentioned it wasn't the book, it wasn't this, it was these moments where we realized what we set out to do is actually happening in the world. And that's what I really want people who are new to you, to women, and to this brand to really know is that's exactly how it appeared to anyone on the outside who is reading the blog, that it was about the change. It was about the mission. It was not about the status. It was not about going out there and just doing what you had to do to make money and be seen and be loved and adored. It was, this is what we're trying to do in the world. This is what we're here to do. And that is, and you pulling it out and saying it the way you did about calling that the highlights, these moments where you see the change that you tried to create in the world, even if somebody else did it, knowing that you played a role in getting to that point, in making those voices and that message loud enough that companies were taking notice of it and saying, we need to do something as well. And that you're most proud of that stuff. It makes perfect sense to me, because that is what I felt as a reader of the blog, is these women, they give a shit, and they are really here because they give a shit.
I give all the shits. I give all the shits in all the right ways. We'll stitch yours twice now, y'all. Okay.
Yeah, can we add a little counter on the bottom of this for how many times Jen's going to cry? So what I would like to add to that, and Jen, I don't know if I've actually told you this story, but part of my reason for being so passionate about this is that growing up, I was quite muscular, just naturally, and then I am an athlete, so that has built onto that, and that is my body type. That is who I am, and I have absolutely learned to embrace it. When I was in middle school, I wrote to 17 magazine asking how I could lose muscle and just become smaller, because I was so embarrassed by the size of my legs and the size of my biceps and all of that. So, that is, and I was born in 1980, just to give everyone perspective of when this is all happening. So the fact that I grew into a place where I could appreciate what my body was doing for me and embrace the muscles that I grew that facilitated that was huge. And that's why it was so important to me to be a part of this. Now, let's fast forward to probably last year, I think. I have a goddaughter she is a runner and an overall really just smart, cool young woman. She is a teenager. She is going into her senior year. And last year I was visiting her. I went up to Michigan for her cross country meet. And she saw I was wearing a t-shirt and I did something and she saw my arms. And she said, "Oh, how did you do that?" And I said, "Do what? What are you talking about?" She's like, "Your arm muscles. How did you get those?" And I was like, "Oh, I mean, I've kind of always had them. I did gymnastics and some weights and push-ups." And she was like, "That's cool." And then she starts bragging to me in the best possible way, but about weights that she's pushing on the leg press and on the adductor, and she maxed out the machine, y'all. I'm and I just I mean, this is where the tears came to my eyes, because I was so proud of her, and she is so proud of what her body can do, and she is so on board with doing things that enable her to continue doing those things. And she's doing physical therapy when something doesn't feel right. And she's accepting that, yes, I'm growing, my body changes, and I'm going to change the way I move along with that. And that's fine. That did not exist when I was in high school, or if it did, I did not see it anywhere. And I mean, sure, she's getting some of that messaging directly from me and has through her life, but we live on opposite sides of the country. I am not there on a daily basis to reinforce that. Yeah. That's not just me. That is what she's able to find elsewhere. And I think that that's phenomenal, especially given the fact that with social media, anybody can put messaging out, and with the right lighting, talent, skill set, whatever, you can make a lot of things sound extremely reputable. But there are good messages coming through and cutting through the noise. So that just makes me feel really proud. It's still very frustrating to see some of the accounts that are out there, really just putting out bad messaging wrapped up in a body positivity bow. But I think the upcoming generation, they have grown up on this. They know what to look for. They are more discerning than we knew to be at that age. And I think that's a real light.
Yeah. I think people are more willing to call people out on it too publicly. With the comment section on these posts, you can see that there's still a lot of people out there that are not buying the bullshit, and that's comforting too, right? To see that we're questioning this stuff now, even if it still exists.
Yeah.
We're not just taking it as like fact. It's not just passing through the filters of our brains and becoming our own internalized beliefs as easily as it did, for those of us who were born in 1980. So, you guys a few years ago decided to hang it up, for lack of a better word. And there was this period of time where the site existed, but there was nothing new going on there. So tell me about what led you there. What was happening during that time period that led up to that decision to take a step back?
Man, I feel like that time period went on so long because Kristen and I were like, well, what do we want to do here? And I struggled for so long with partially not wanting to let the site go because it was such a big part of my identity. Even though it was about the greater we, it was still so close to me. It's like my firstborn. And then I was like, well, how are we going to monetize? And again, remember, I'm jaded at this phase too, very jaded. And I literally just kept putting like intention after intention out there. And like, Chris and I would have so many conversations about this. Like, we don't want the site to just go away and for this messaging to not be there, because so many social media posts are still, especially on Pinterest, are still like floating around and people are using the workouts and coming back, and the site was still getting, thousands of hits a day. So I was like, it's being used. We're not putting anything into it. We looked at sunsetting it entirely. I attempted to communicate with the copyright office because I think Design Sponge had gone away like that. Like, they got them to host the site and therefore just live forever, but they'd have to pay for the hosting and everything because there was still a cost associated with the site, even being fairly dormant. So that didn't go anywhere. And then eventually Kristen got a really brilliant idea here, which I'll let her talk about. But personally, I had my twins. That pregnancy was rough. That pregnancy took a lot of energy away from me. I finally feel like once I had the twins, then once I was kind of getting back into a groove, I'd lost a lot of myself creatively through that process, and particularly in a number of different relationships, mostly my marriage. None of that was helping. I was over giving at a level that was not sustainable and lost so much of myself that like my creativity was just gone. So when it came to, these are just now realizations that I've had recently, but looking back, like, cry meter, let's go. There was nothing else to give. There was nothing I could give. Everything was going everywhere else. And then once I felt like maybe some of the stuff was going to come back, COVID hit, and then everything just got amplified in the worst ways.
Yeah. So for me, it was just the changing landscape of digital publishing. It changed drastically. And I was working as a freelance writer at the time. So I was working for all these other outlets and seeing how they were having to be nimble or not. My main freelancing job was eliminated at one point. So that was just from a very practical level, that was a little bit of the impetus of where I was like, okay, I'm going to have to find like other things that make money for me. And that took away my time and creativity. I think somewhere around that time, I started having some more issues with knees and some other health and physical challenges that makes it just a little bit tough sometimes to talk about how great all these workouts are and to preach that. I still believe it, but when I can't do it, little dagger.
Yeah.
And then my dad died, and grief sucks a lot of creativity out of you.
Yeah.
So like Jen, I was in a bit of a position where I didn't have a whole hell of a lot to give. And then I was in my early 40s and started experiencing some changes and got to talking to more women. I was like, oh shit, perimenopause. Cool. Nobody told me about this. No. So that was fun and exciting. But what it did do was it opened my eyes to this other world of women's health and fitness. And there were some people who were doing a great job of it. And that's where, like, Girls Gone Strong is where I was picking up on a lot of important messaging. And Jen and I got to talking because we're like, well, we are different people. We are in different parts of our lives than we were when all this started. So are many of our readers. The people who came up with us, like, they're in the same boats. They are raising children. They're losing parents. They're going into perimenopause. They are going out of it. Like, we are in a lot of different places than we were in 2008, 2010. And I thought, well, if we're going to do something more with the site, and we weren't sure what we were going to do at that point, but if we're going to do something else, we've got to address this. Like, we've got to talk about this stage of life. Here's the problem is that is not what we were trained in. That is not, like, I was learning as I went along, but that's not the same as having certifications and education and decades of experience in it. So the more we talked about it, the more we thought, hell yeah, it's important. Wow, we might not be the ones to do that. And so as that was going along, we're still entertaining potential offers to buy, all of which wanted to turn it into an SEO farm or far worse. There were some fairly icky possibilities out there. I mean, Fit Bottom Girls can lend itself as a name to some seedier ideas. And we just, like, can you imagine being a longtime follower, going away, coming back and finding something that is just so off brand? And we just thought, like, God, we can't do that. Who could take this and elevate it into this next stage, into using the right messaging, who gets us, who knows? And we've been really fortunate that over the years, we've had some amazing contributors be a part of this. Susan Lakey, who is now digital editor at Triathlete, Jet Set Sarah, who is a travel writer and just literally runs all over the world. And let's say, perhaps most importantly, Allie coming on. And you had already brought so much in, like, your depth of knowledge and commitment to helping women achieve their fullest lives was huge. And we knew you were in our age group. The Durable Runner, your book, is just such a Bible for understanding how to care for your body and do the best you can to enable yourself to do the things you want to do. But that's really where we landed, was like, okay, if we can't find big buyer who's going to take this and run with it, we would rather hand off and, like, get it into the hands of someone who can do right by it, really, for our followers. It had, at that point, I think, a lot less to do with us than it did with the community that we've built. And you were the first and the only name that came to mind for that. There was no one else we had come up with who we felt good about doing that.
And we knew your heart, like I had enough conversations, heart-to-heart conversations with you. We all had, that we knew that you were 100% to be trusted with this. Not only do you have the background, like business, you're a hard worker, you're organized, and your personal story too, as to how you took a leap on yourself and how that kind of mirrored some of what we went through. And it just, in this stage of my life, all I do is talk about full circles, and it's just the best full circle. It's just the best.
And that's a wrap for this week's episode of the Fit Bottom Girls podcast. But don't worry, we're dropping new episodes every Thursday. In the meantime, head over to the show notes for all the links from today's episode, or go to fitbottomedgirls.com/podcast to catch up on past episodes. Thanks for being here. I'll see you next week.